Welcome back. My name is Andromedas, and in this video we're going to be talking about freshness of coffee. As I've stated, if you see my intro video, intro video? No, I think it was my story of how I got into it. Anyway, one of the things about coffee is once you roast it, the freshness starts going down at a particular rate. Depending on if it's light roasted, dark roasted, or medium roasted or dark roasted. And another thing that can affect it is once you grind it. That process is even more faster than what it would be if you just left it as a whole. And then there's the temperature. If it's warm, if you keep it in a warm area and there's sunlight, like say if you have a clear jar and you got sunlight hitting it, then that freshness goes down even more. So there's different things that you need to look out for when you're buying coffee, and there's things that you need to do when you're storing coffee. The first thing is whenever a coffee is roasted, regardless of what type of roast they do, there's always a what they call a resting period that you need to go through, and ask if you get it from your local coffee shop, then ask your roaster, what the resting period is, because otherwise, if you watch YouTube videos, you will get, or do a Google search, you will get varying different types of answers for that. So it's best to ask the person that you're buying the roast from, if it's a fresh roast. And you may not always be able to buy fresh roast coffee. I think I've bought it twice in the last 6-7 years, because they are a little bit more expensive than usual. But it's okay every now and then to treat yourself if you can do it and you can get away with it. And trust me, it is a treat when you have fresh roasted coffee. But if you can't buy a fresh roasted coffee from your local coffee shop, then your only other option is to either get it from, like, say, Amazon, for instance, or from a grocery store. And as I've stated before, one of the things that you have to look out for, and the advantages of being in a grocery store or a retail store versus online shopping, is you can pick up the bag, you can look to see what the date is on that bag, whereas you can't really do that with online. And there's some brands that don't even have the date on it. So, but what you need to look out for when you're looking for freshness to dates, most of the time it's a use by date. Every now and then you'll find one where it actually has a roasted date. That's preferable. But if you can only find a use by date, then what you're looking for is, preferably, in my preference anyway, is at least a year out. And what I mean by that is, like this month we're in August right now, about to be in September. So what I'm looking for in a use by date is August of the following year. So this is 2022, so I'm looking for August of 2023 or September of 2023. Now, I have a little window that I play with, or wiggle room that I like to use sometimes. If I can't find it within that year, or in that year at least, then 9 months. I will literally pick up bags until I find something that's 9 months to a year out. So 9 months, September, August, July, June, July of 2023 is what I'd be looking at if I was looking at a bag right now. Occasionally you'll find something that doesn't have the optimal freshness date, but somehow it's still fresh. I don't know how. I don't know what their calculations or whatever that they're going by. But so if you have a roasted date on it, the chances are you don't have to worry about the resting period on that, because you were buying it from a retailer. It probably sat on the shelf for a little bit anyways, past the resting period. And what resting period is, basically, there's a certain amount of off-gassing that's released for a little bit after it's roasted. You'll get more when you brew your coffee, but that's okay. But the initial one, is it really affects the taste of it, and can be quite bitter. So what you want to do is you want to let it rest for a certain period of time, usually 7-10 days, somewhere in there. So okay, we bought your coffee. You determine that it's within your comfortable range of use by date. You get home, and let's say you're like me and you buy big bags, pound, 2 pounds of bag of whole bean coffee. Now the grinder I used to have, I could grind an exact amount every time I wanted to grind it. But it was a cheap grinder, and I decided to, and it ended up crapping out on me, so I ended up getting another grinder that's a little bit more expensive. The little bit more expensive one, when I try to grind, like say I want to grind 26 grams of coffee, then it wants to pop like popcorn when it gets down to a little bit. What I mean is the coffee beans will bounce around, and you may not get all the beans grounded like you wanted it to. So I do tend to just fill up the hopper on top and up to a certain point. But what I do is I take the rest of it and I'll put it in the refrigerator, because what that does is it keeps the heat, it keeps sunlight, the ultraviolet rays off the coffee, and allows the coffee to be more fresh. Also, when you're looking for coffee bags, you want, if you're not going to put it in a different container, if you're going to keep it in the bag as is, then you really want to find a bag that's resealable. And I don't mean that tape stuff. That tape stuff only sticks for so long, and oftentimes it comes off after a couple of uses, and then what? So what you want to find is those ones that's got that little strip that goes across it. You can fold over. And I am really paranoid about air being in my food, so I will literally squeeze as much air as I can get out of the bag as I'm folding it up and everything, so that way I make sure that it stays as fresh as long as possible. Let's see what else. Yeah, when you grind your coffee, you want to grind it for every time that you're using coffee. You don't want to grind a whole bunch ahead of time, because as I said before, when you grind your coffee, you start shortening the freshness of that really fast. I don't think it's linear. I think it's an exponential increase on how much freshness you lose over a period of time once it's been ground. So what you want to do is you want to grind it as you're using it. Say like if you normally get, like I drink 16 ounces of coffee in one go, then what I do is I grind just enough coffee for that 16 ounces that I have already worked out and figured out what's best for it, and then I won't grind anymore. So that way my coffee is always freshly ground, and it will taste better that way. It lasts longer that way. This video is already a little bit long, but I have a video where I showed you the brewing process I have, or one of them anyway. And one of the things that you will notice, first of all, I'm not used to filming anything, and so you will see me pouring water a little bit more aggressively than what I'm used to. Usually I have a very light stream that I'm using to pour coffee with. But what I want you to pay attention to, and this is the thing I'm trying to get at, is when you have fresh coffee, or mostly fresh coffee, then when you first, after you wet the grounds and let it sit there for a few seconds, 30 seconds or so, depending on who you listen to, when you start doing your actual pour, you will start noticing that the coffee starts swelling up. If it's fairly fresh, it'll start swelling up and it'll look like, best way I can describe it is like a brownie or a chocolate cupcake just rising as it's being baked. And the fresher it is, the more that happens, and it just expands. And to me, it's like really beautiful to watch that. But another thing is, toward the end of it, you'll notice that there's like a light brown color, what is called crema. Now, in this particular case, you don't want to drink that. That stays in the filter and everything like that, but it's still beautiful. But the thicker that crema is, the more fresher it is. And it can also depend on the roast. I've noticed that light roast seems to have less of that than what, say, medium or dark has. But for the most part, it's still going to be a fairly, somewhat thick crema. But if it's really watered down and barely there, then the coffee is not all that fresh. It's not a hopeless cause. You can still drink coffee that's not quite as fresh. Matter of fact, if you look up James Hoffman, you'll find a video where he drank coffee from, oh God, I think 1950s or something like that. Not advisable. I mean, it was sealed, so there was nothing to be able to get to it or whatever, but I wouldn't advise drinking something that old. But what I'm saying is, don't waste coffee. If for some reason you find you're not drinking that much coffee and you still got like half of a bag of coffee left, then don't throw it out just because it's been there for 2 or 3 months. Still drink it. There's still some good in it. It's just not going to be as good as it was if it was fresher. And like I said in the other video, the fresher it is, the more of those different notes that you get, the chocolates, the nuts, the toffee, the berry, the citrus, and you'll get less of that the older the coffee is, or the less fresher that it is. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the video that's going to be attached at the end of it. Stick around. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and we'll talk about in another video what I was using, and I'll film a different thing, method that I use, and we'll talk about other methods of brewing coffee in a later video. But hopefully you enjoy it, because I know I did. Peace.